Can you save more by saving less earlier? Why do you need to start investing for retirement now? What do you do once the money is actually in your retirement account? Let's find out in today's episode. Welcome to Money Talk with Skylar Fleming, where we all do better with money by talking about it. Let's get talking. Welcome to today's episode of Money Talk. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming. Today we tackle the thrilling world of retirement savings, because nothing says party like planning for the distant future, am I right? Today, we're diving headfirst into why starting early with your savings is like planting a money tree that just keeps on giving. We'll debunk some myths, uncover some secrets to maxing out those employer matches, which is free money by the way, and maybe even sprinkle in some tips on how to retire like a rock star. So grab your favorite drink, and if you're feeling adventurous, let's turn savings into the coolest thing since sliced bread. The money talking points for today's episode are: can starting to save earlier with smaller amounts lead to larger retirement funds compared to saving larger amounts later? Do you know the difference between a 401k, Roth IRA, and traditional IRA? And which one do you think is best for you? Are you taking full advantage of any employer matching contributions in your retirement plan? With those money talking points in mind, let's get talking. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining today's interview on Money Talk with Skylar Fleming. Joining me today, I have Jenny Logan. We're talking about retirement today, and I'm excited for this conversation. But Jenny, would you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah. Hi, Skylar. Thank you for having me on Money Talk. I'm Jenny Logan. I'm a certified financial planner, and I'm an owner of a business, online financial planning company that I've owned for about 15 years. And so we work with clients all over the country, individuals, families looking to, build their portfolios, build a financial plan. So that's kind of my perspective that we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you here, talk a little bit about retirement. We're going to get into some good questions like, what is saving for retirement versus investing? Do you have to invest it? So there's some good things coming up for everybody. But let's start just right out the gate. Why should people even care about saving early in their life?
Yeah, well, there's a couple reasons. There's a lot. It's always first and foremost, I like to tell people it's a good habit. A lot of people that struggle with savings, I've found it's, of course, a cash flow problem, right? You want to have enough money to save, but there's also that mindset and habit forming. And so the earlier you start just knowing, okay, I have to set X dollars aside towards retirement, or, whatever other goals you might have, and you start doing it, it's like part of you. It becomes part of your habits. So that's one reason why I say do it as soon as you can, do it early. And then the other thing is, obviously, time is on your side. So if you start earlier, so let's say you start in your 20s, and then you invest the money, particularly for retirement, you're not only going to be saving that money, but you're going to be putting it in the market, which will also grow the money. And the longer the money is in the market and invested in growing, the more money you're going to have. If you start later, let's say, your late 30s, early 40s, or even after that, you're going to have to save a lot more money to amass the equivalent you would have if you just started saving in your 20s.
Yeah, and that honestly, it's a little further down our list of questions, but you kind of led into it perfectly of, is it true that someone can save less earlier than if someone starts later? Do they have to save more later? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's actually a huge reality that I think a lot of people who put off savings, particularly for retirement, have to realize. So if you start in your 20s, and in your 20s, you're not making that much money, right? You're starting out with your career. You're probably just getting going. And so typically your income is less. But if you really start that habit and you save a little bit, obviously the recommended is 10, ideally it's 15% towards retirement. Then you just keep going along. If you do that in your 20s, you're going to be a lot better off, because every dollar you put into the market, you're also going to be investing, which will grow at anywhere between 6 to 10 to even 12%, depends on what you're invested in. But if you start, let's say 20 years later, you're going to have to save a lot more money percentage-wise of your income to essentially catch up if you had just saved less percentage-wise in your 20s. Now, one thing I will say, and I didn't know if this would come up, I do caution people, if you are on the later spectrum, right? Late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, and you haven't done a good job of saving for retirement, don't let this reality stop you. There is the realistic nature that many of us don't have the income available to save until our careers take off. We don't realize the importance, right? So don't stop yourself, but just be aware, like now you're going to have to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, because I think of that. If you haven't invested and you do have to start later, sure, now you're coming to grips with the reality that you're going to need to save a little bit more. But if that makes you stop, now you're even worse off. Like further down the road, it's even harder just the older you get if you just let that fear and that uncertainty of that higher percentage stop you. But I do think it's good to think in percentages, because if you think 10 to 15 is high, you're still going to think 20 to 25 is high, even when you have more money, because percentages are equivalent. Like they take 20% is 20% no matter how much you make. So you need to start soon. And like you said, don't let it dissuade you if you haven't started.
Yeah. Well, and the reality too is as you make more money, your income, your lifestyle expands to match that income, right? And so not only will the percentage have to go up if you don't start early, but now you've expanded your lifestyle. It might be even harder to make those cuts necessary to catch up. So there's just so many things working against you if you don't start as soon as you can.
Yeah. And so just get started. I often, you'll get asked this at the very end, but when I ask people what's one thing you wish you knew sooner, so many people say time, the power of time with your money, starting sooner, that sort of stuff. So it's a big deal. But let's move into some misconceptions. Let's move into some thoughts people have about retirement. What are some of those common misconceptions people have about saving?
Well, I think one is, I can do this later when I have more money, when I get that career advancement, when I don't have to pay for private school or whatever it might be. The other is I think people vastly underestimate how much their retirement is going to cost. Even people who are responsibly saving, they don't sit down and really look at what their current lifestyle costs look like. What is your budget? What are you actually spending every year? And what is it going to be required to sustain that in investments? And then, of course, taking into account things like healthcare, potential long-term care costs that will increase. And the third thing that actually kind of along the same lines I see all the time with clients who I work with before retirement and then after retirement, the vastly underestimate of what their hobbies and travel expenses or things they're going to plan on doing in retirement are going to cost. Because you have a lot more downtime once you stop retiring. Yeah. And a lot of us don't realize we're going to spend the money to spend our downtime. So, I would say just if you're out there saving for retirement and you feel like you're doing a good job, great. Go run some projections to see realistically if it's going to cover your lifestyle.
Do you think people can tend to, and this is speaking to the hobbies and traveling, do people tend to think that retirement's easy? Like they don't develop those hobbies beforehand. They don't know what they're going to do and they just think it's just going to come to them. This is speaking a little bit more of once people get into retirement, but is that something that's maybe a misconception?
Yeah, I think, well, there's a couple things. I think people put off things to retirement. I see it all the time. Like, oh, when I retire, I'm going to take on X hobby. The first piece of advice, which is not financial advice, this is life advice. Don't do that. If you think you're interested in something, try to make time for it before you retire. One, to kind of your point, to really find out what that hobby is going to cost. What is this hobby you're getting into? Even things like, I'm a big gardener and we have some animals. Those things cost money. And if I had waited to retirement and not really factored in the true cost of that hobby, that really would have eaten into like what I had saved. So yeah, I think piece of advice, really think about it. But two, like don't put stuff off if you really think you're interested in it. But yeah, you definitely want to overestimate your hobbies because they're going to be more expensive. It's like everything. It's going to be 10, 15, 20% more than you think it's going to be.
Well, especially when you've grown accustomed to this lifestyle where maybe you're living comfortably and you don't want to start your hobby out from like bare bones square one. You're like, oh, I can get the comfortable, nice computer that I need for this instead of maybe being a little scrappy with it. So expect it to cost more.
Exactly. Expect everything to cost a little more than you think.
That's awesome. So people are thinking, oh, well, I don't need to retire yet. We talked about how one of the risks is you need to save more, a higher percentage. What are some of the other risks that people have to face when they come to delaying savings for retirement?
Well, so I touched a little bit on the power of exponentially growing your money using investment returns. So that's one, every dollar that you save for retirement, right? The assumption I am making is that hopefully you're putting that dollar into the stock market. You're investing it in the US equities market. And so that means over the coming decades, that dollar will grow. And you could project that to grow, a really conservative percentage would be 6% on average per year. That's what we use with our clients, but to be fair, that's very low. You're going to likely do better. So for every decade or so that you avoid putting your money into the market, you avoid all that growth on that money. Now, people listening might be like, oh, but there's down years. Maybe I'll avoid those. When I say the average is, 6 to even maybe 12%, that includes those down years, right? And average means over time. It doesn't mean year by year. So keeping that in mind. So you miss out on the stock market growth, which really helps with your savings goals. If you have an employer match, potentially, if you're saving for retirement through an employer plan, you may have a match where the company is going to say for every dollar you contribute, we'll contribute X dollars up to some amount. Commonly we'll see like 3%. Some of them are higher, 6, even 10%. But if you're not contributing to that, you're not going to receive the match. So you need to make sure that you do that. It's free money. And then, like I mentioned before, I think one really overlooked risk is just that habit. Living into the cash flow you have without setting money aside, it's going to be a lot harder to then go backwards and say, okay, I have to save for retirement, but I haven't been doing it. That means I have to start putting this money away from my paycheck. And to your point, Skylar, like 10% at 20 might seem overwhelming, but imagine if it's 25 or 30% at, late 40s. Now you've really got some cash flow issues.
Yeah, and your lifestyle is at that point used to that money you're bringing home. And this brought up the thought in my mind of the book, The Automatic Millionaire. He talks a lot about how starting with that small percentage, like you said, builds that habit, but then you can increase it by 1% to 2% every so often. And it makes it so easy to get to that 15, 20%. But if you started early, maybe you don't need to do that. But that's how you can get to that bigger number, is just some slow, simple steps. It's so hard to go there all at once.
Oh, exactly. And so that kind of goes along the same lines of, as I was cautioning people who maybe haven't started, don't let our conversation stop you. And also, it's not all or nothing. Like to your point exactly. If you do get started today, get started. And then each month, each quarter, each year, just tick it up a couple percentage, and eventually you will get there.
Great. I love the underlying theme of don't let our conversation stop you. If anything, start thinking about the long term that is still after you. Like, sure, maybe you're in your 40s, but people are living longer and longer. Maybe you're in your 50s, but maybe your investments start to go towards your future, your children, your grandchildren, things like that. So just kind of maybe shift your mindset to that long time horizon, make it a little easier on yourself to get started, and then you can crank it up a little bit quicker. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic there. So let's talk a little bit about maybe retirement accounts first. There's a couple of things we're going to talk about here is where do you save for retirement? And then we're going to talk about actually investing it. But let's start with the first one. Where do you put retirement money?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most people, or the majority of people in America, have access to, I shouldn't say majority, a large percentage of people have access to a work provided retirement plan. Oftentimes they're called a 401k or a 403b. If you're sort of in the nonprofit or government sector, if you have one of those, that is the easiest, most straightforward place to start. You can simply set up how much you want to contribute from your paycheck each pay period. So it's automatically deducted. You can pick the investments within, there's a lineup of investments you can pick from. And sometimes the plan will help you based on your age and stuff. And so that's the easiest place. If you don't have one of those though, there's plenty of other things you can do. You can have a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA. Those are just accounts that you open at an institution that you like. I recommend, Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, if you have some banks offer them. And you can put money in there. And depending on if you use a Roth or an IRA, a traditional IRA, some of it's going to be pre-tax, so you get a deduction, or it might not be pre-tax, but you have those options. And then if you're self-employed, there's also some options you can actually, depending on your business, potentially have a 401k you set up for your company or yourself, or you may have a SEP, which is similar to an IRA, just with higher contribution amounts. So there's so many options out there that there's really no excuse. It really just takes, go on YouTube, do some Googling, and you can see kind of what some of those options might be.
Yeah, you can search any Vanguard, Roth IRA setup, like any of those accounts, and someone has a YouTube video on how to walk you through doing it. Or you can call, like most of those places, they'll be happy to sign you up because that means they're going to get some of your money. So there's plenty of people to help you with that.
I was just going to add that I know I mentioned with the 401k and 403b, it's easy because they automatically draw it from your each pay period. But the Roth and the IRAs, those can also be set up to be auto contribution. So, there's very versatile options out there.
Yeah. And direct deposit is like the secret hidden gem of finance automation. I don't think people use it as much as they could because you can split where your money's going. You can make it so easy and that's where the magic comes, is when you don't see it. That's why the government has us pay taxes straight out of our paycheck. So you don't see it. It makes it a lot easier to pay. So if it's going to your retirement accounts, it's a whole lot easier to save 10% when you don't even realize it's part of your paycheck. You're just getting what you get.
Very true.
So we're talking about saving in these accounts. And I think people, once you're in the finance space, you kind of match saving with investing. But some people hear saving and they think they're just putting cash away. Or like my works 401k, the main account that the money's going into is just a cash account, which is terrible. I've spoke against that for a while, that we don't have any sort of target date funds or things like that. But what does investing your retirement actually mean once the money gets into these accounts?
Yeah, Skylar, I'm glad you mentioned this because so many clients that come through my door will, I ask for statements and I'm looking at their statements because I always look at the investments and I'm like, do you realize you've been sitting in cash for like 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
So here's the problem with that. You lose on that extra growth. So like I mentioned, on average each year, you're going to, in addition to what you've contributed, that money's going to grow by, let's just say conservatively 6%. That's money you don't have to save. That's money that's going to grow it. And it's a bigger account and there's more available to sustain your retirement. And so if you are investing for retirement, make sure, I would say go to your 401k login or your IRA, whatever you have today, and make sure, and of course, I'm not going to give you investment advice specifically, but make sure you're in the equities market. That is where the growth is going to happen. And if you're sitting in cash and you're nervous about that, you don't know what to invest in, talk to somebody, get some advice, because you don't want to miss out on that growth each year.
This doesn't even have to be crazy specific advice. Like, yes, sitting down with a financial advisor can be really helpful to help you plan out your investments. But even I have coworkers at my job that they'll just ask me like, hey, what is this investment? Because that's places where people even get stuck sometimes. So you might have a coworker even that understands it a little bit more. And that's a great place to have a money talk and just get the conversation started.
Yeah. And I will say this, and this is, again, I have to qualify. This is not specific investment advice. I don't know your situation, blah, blah, blah. If you don't know where to start, I think Skylar brings up a good point. Ask around, go on YouTube. You don't necessarily need to pay someone for sure. But if you're young and you don't know where to start, easiest place, total stock market fund. Vanguard has one, Schwab has one, Fidelity has one. Just pick it, put your money in that, forget about it. 30 years later, you'll thank me. So, that's my recommendation for people who are just starting out and they're young.
Awesome. And of course, that always has to come with, it's not specific advice, but pretty much if you start in those simple index funds, you're going to be good and you're not going to need to sue someone for their financial advice, so to speak, because you're going to be just fine. So it's a great place to start. But as we're coming to a close here, that was a fantastic conversation about saving for retirement, where to save, how to actually invest it, and some of the benefits of starting early. And of course, if you have anything else to add or ask, please do so. But a couple questions as we come down here to the end. I'll ask you this one last, but just to get you thinking about it, my final question is, what's one thing you wish you knew sooner when it comes to money? But before you answer that, how can people find you online or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my company website is chisholmfinancialplanning.com. You can find me on YouTube as well at Chisholm Finance and on Substack, which is our Chisholm Financial Planning Dispatch. So I write and, make videos about financial planning. We like to educate the public. So being in business over the last 15 years, I've seen lots of different things, lots of different scenarios. And I've learned that really the fundamentals, like our conversation today, are where people are lost and they get sidetracked with these sort of like very online ideas or strategies. And it's like, no, let's just get back to basics. So we really highlight that particularly on our YouTube channel.
I love that. The basics are a great place for people to make sure they have their foundation under them. But Jenny, as we wrap up here, what's one thing that if you had to go back in the past and tell yourself about money, what's one thing you would share with everyone?
The one thing I would say, and of course we're highlighting starting early, so I'm not going to say that, but what I am going to say is that there are firm rules when it comes to financial planning that will work for everybody. That being said, a true financial plan and success has to take into account your situation. What is it that you want your life to look like? Not what society tells you it should look like, not, hard and fast rules like you have to retire at a certain age, but really, what do you want your life to look like? And build a financial plan around that. And that's really, it's going to look different for everybody. And you can apply these straightforward rules and strategies to what you're trying to accomplish.
Fantastic. I love that. You get to choose your lifestyle and that's what's going to work for you. And that it's totally possible to build a financial plan around that. That's what I heard. We don't all have to live the same exact lifestyle where we're all doing the exact same thing. So awesome. Fantastic. This has been a great conversation, and I'm sure people took away that they need to start early, but it's still possible to start wherever they are. But Jenny, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Skylar. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much to Jenny Logan for coming on today's episode and for that great conversation we were able to have. What are some of the ways that conversation can impact you? What do you think? Let me know, shoot me an email, or let me know on social media. My TikTok is actually growing a lot, and there's some comments happening there, so make sure you're going over there and engaging in the conversation. But now you've decided to tune into the podcast, and you wanted to figure out what you can take away. Let's go over some quick things that'll impact you after you soaked in all the wisdom we just gave. Well, first, your future you will thank you. It's 30 years from now. You're lounging on the beach. You're sipping your favorite drink, enjoying the great sun, the great beach. You're high-fiving past you because you started early, and that was awesome because you're now able to have compound interest work in your favor. You're seeing the fruits of your labor and that magic of compound interest. So that's the first way you can have an impact, is that your future you will thank you. You're also then able to dodge that I'll save later trap that everybody tries to tell you can do. You'll finally understand why it's just a sneaky way of saying I'll regret this later, because your friends may be in denial since they didn't start saving, but you won't be because you started early after listening to today's episode. You're also going to become a ninja when it comes to retirement planning. You're going to be the go-to person for your coworkers to ask, how much do I need to put away for my retirement in order to get that company match? What is a company match? And then you're going to use the word Roth, and your friends are going to be blown away. So you're going to be able to take a lot away from today's episode. You're also going to have a great dose of reality and know that retirement can be expensive, and there's things that you need to consider, like maybe hobbies you've been putting off, and that health insurance and healthcare can be expensive as well. You're also going to know that you don't want to leave your money sitting in cash. That's something we talked about in today's episode. You got to make sure it's invested. Keep it simple in a total market index fund. Don't forget about that employer match. It's been mentioned on so many episodes on my podcast, but make sure you get it. Also, realize your hobbies need to be figured out maybe a little bit before you retire. And you also may have something you're saving for retirement, but be aware of those costs when it comes to figuring out how much retirement's going to cost you. And after today's episode, the main thing you're going to do is get rid of procrastination when it comes to retirement savings. I believe in you. You can stop postponing retirement, but you can also still have a fun and enjoyable life. Figure out those hobbies and do them now, as well as saving for retirement. That's why it's so important to set those percentages and then just leave them and let them be, because your lifestyle is going to adjust around what you set those percentages as when you're saving and investing for your retirement. So I hope you're ready, because after today's episode, you're going to have some major upgrades to make. You're going to have to become a Jedi Master of retirement planning, so to speak. Always remember, the best time to start investing was yesterday, and the second best time is today. So go out and get your money invested and start saving for your retirement. But next, let's talk about the money talking points. Here we are once again at the money talking points, and remember, the point of these is to take them and talk about them with a friend. Send your friend a text message of one of the money talking points, and then of course, link them to today's episode because I'd be very grateful for that. But the first money talking point is, can you start saving earlier with smaller amounts and lead to a larger retirement fund compared to saving larger amounts later? And yes, this is 100% true. The earlier you start, the more time that money has to grow. And consistency helps so much. So build the savings habit now. And there's a great picture that I found that I'll link the article in the show notes. But it says Susan invests $5,000 annually between the ages of 25 and 35. Bill invests $5,000 annually between the ages of 35 and 65. And Chris invests $5,000 annually between the ages of 25 and 65. Of course, we can tell that Chris is probably going to have the most money because he continues to invest. But then once they've actually reached that point where they stop saving, this is how much total they have invested. So this is their cash, the principal balance of their investment account. Susan, after doing $5,000 from 25 to 35, invests $50,000. Bill, $5,000 from 35 to 65, invests $150,000. Chris, investing $5,000 annually from 25 to 65, invests total $200,000. Now, who do you think has the most money? Well, you're going to maybe be a little bit shocked to find out. Of course, it's Chris. He started the earliest, but the real contest is between Susan and Bill. Because Bill invested longer. Bill invested for 30 years, and he invested $150,000. Whereas Susan invested only $50,000. But Susan wound up with $602,000, whereas Bill ended up with $540,000. Now you're asking yourself, you said Chris had the most money. How much did he have? Well, Chris, because of consistency and doing it over a long period of time, ended up with $1.1 million. So there's a lot of money that can come from consistency and then also starting earlier. I mean, the thing that I learned here is that Bill wasn't totally screwed. He did it from 35 to 65. He invested $150,000, but he did only end up with $540,000. But this is where, if you start a little bit later, you still can do it. You just maybe have to increase that amount that you're investing. So there's a lot of ways this can work, but ultimately, starting earlier and staying consistent will be good. But even just starting earlier for 10 years can be better than doing the same thing 10 years later for the rest of your working life. So there's a lot of ways that plays out, but I hope I was able to paint that picture for you over a podcast. But make sure you head over to the show notes and click on the link that says, I wish I started saving earlier after seeing this chart, and go check out the chart. The second money talking point is, do you know the difference between a 401k, Roth IRA, and traditional IRA, and which one do you think is best for you? Well, a 401k is offered by an employer, often includes matching contributions. Contributions are pre-tax, even though some can be Roth, which we'll learn about in a second. And then if it's traditional, we'll talk about both of those a little bit more with the IRA actually. But the 401k is offered by employers. The Roth IRA is contributions being made with after-tax dollars. Withdrawals during retirement are tax-free, including the earnings, which is fantastic news. Who doesn't love tax-free? And that's what makes Roth such a good option for so many people. The traditional IRA is where you're postponing paying those taxes. Your money goes into the IRA or your traditional 401k pre-tax, and taxes are paid upon withdrawal during retirement. So there's both options, both play a good role in different tax planning situations. The Roth one is easy because then you get your money in and you don't have to pay any more taxes on it. It's simple and easy and avoids paying any more taxes to the government. So decide which one's best for you. Often a good fallback is the Roth option because it is simple. The third money talking point is, are you taking full advantage of any employer matching contributions in your retirement plan? And think about this, those employee matching contributions are part of your compensation. You need to make sure you claim it. And be aware of vesting periods because those do matter, because maybe you can stay for one more month and get a good amount of your money as yours. Vesting means the money is vested to you. I don't know how best to word it, but it means that it's actually your money now. Instead of sometimes, if it's on a vesting schedule, if you leave before you reach certain thresholds, then that company is able to take some of that money back. It's a way to get people to stay for longer. And it's a good way to boost your retirement savings because you're getting some good money from another source that you don't have to put into the market. So imagine you're 25 to 35, but also that money you invested had a 10% match on it. So now your employer is putting in more money on your behalf. It's a great way to make more money. And one of the first steps that everyone needs to do is you need to make sure you are getting at least the full employer match by putting in as much money as you can in order to reach that threshold. Sometimes we'll put in 4%. If you put in 8%, make sure you're putting in 8%. Then you got to make sure you're getting that full employer match. But next, I want to talk about the handy hint and what it means to start simple with your investments. Okay, you're extremely confused after listening to so much jargon and talk from many podcasts about investing. How do you actually get started? Well, start simple with investments. Begin with your workplace plan. If you have access to a 401k, it's a great place to start. These plans are straightforward. They often come with that crucial employer match. And they often even have ways to invest with a target date fund. Those can be a great starting place as well. But contributions are automatically deducted from your paycheck, and that makes it way easier to stay consistent because I think, honestly, the direct deposit is a hidden superpower of financial automation. You can do a lot with it, and a lot that helps modify your behavior so that you're putting money in places and leaving it alone. You also need to maybe consider IRAs. Like I said, both Roth and traditional are popular options. You can open up these accounts at really any major institution like Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, M1 Finance. But once you contribute, you can choose how to invest the money with these accounts. And you can also put money directly into these with a direct deposit. There's got to be a way to do it with an account and routing number. Also, if you're self-employed, consider things like a SEP IRA or a solo 401k. I don't know a whole lot about these plans, so make sure you're consulting a professional and doing some more research on your own. But make sure you start simple. A total stock market index fund is a great starting point. Avoid holding cash in your retirement accounts because it needs to be invested to grow. So that $1 million that was able to be earned in that story I told at the graph, that is because it was invested. This is going to be my hill to die on. Don't leave your retirement account in cash, please. I noticed this at my work and I brought it up, and it's concerning that so many people's retirement accounts are probably sitting in cash. That is so concerning because it's not doing anything. Because if you put in $5,000, maybe after many years you're going to have like $5,200, but that's not investing. That's going to make people feel like their retirement account screwed them over. So make sure your money is actually invested. I love to sing this song, and I'll make sure it's always being mentioned, especially with workplace plans. Make sure your money is actually invested. But what are some common misconceptions about retirement? Let's talk about those next. Alrighty, I have 3 common misconceptions here. The first one is I can save later. Most people believe they can just postpone saving for retirement because maybe you'll earn more later, which is fair and maybe it could catch you up. But this delays the incredible benefits of compound growth that is needed to increase the amount you have for retirement, and it makes it so much easier so you have to save less as you get older. And guess what? If you start now and you're able to save less as you get older, as your income increases, you're going to be able to enjoy life more without having to worry about your retirement way down the road because you've already started saving and you can keep that amount small because of the benefits of compound interest. We also need to make sure to understand retirement costs. People often miscalculate how much you'll need. There's crucial things to factor in like healthcare, long-term care, hobbies, travel, other expenses. What hobbies do you want to start? Are you doing things that's going to help you save for retirement? Are you starting hobbies now to figure out how much they'll cost? Maybe dip your toes into your retirement a little bit with trying out some of your hobbies. You also need to make sure you don't overestimate how easy it is to retire, because it's often a time to catch up on deferred activities, yes, but also if you don't really know what you're interested in, it's going to be really hard to actually retire. It's important to address your interests and needs now rather than just postponing them, just so you can at least give it an experiment and try it out before you retire. Because what if you retire with this laundry list of potential hobbies and you hate all of them? Now you're going to be like, well, may as well go back and get a job. But no, don't do that. That's not fun. Stay retired, but you need to dip your toes into it a little bit beforehand and figure out what you actually want to do. And that wraps up common misconceptions. Next, I want to talk about what's at stake if you don't start investing, no matter your age. Alrighty, what is at stake? Well, you're going to miss out on potential exponential growth. The earlier you start, the more benefit you get from compound interest. Delaying investing means losing out on potential growth. Also, don't forget to make sure you don't forfeit employer matches. If you don't contribute to your 401k, your employer's not just going to give you money. but you need to make sure you're contributing so you can get that money that your employer's promising you as that employer match. You're also going to lack the savings habit. How much harder is it to start when you're at 45, 50, maybe you have kids and your life is expensive and you still haven't started saving for retirement? How much harder is it going to be to build that habit and start to save and invest when you then have to actually knock down your lifestyle a little bit in order to put a lot of money into retirement? Delaying it makes it harder and harder to develop these crucial habits that you need later in life. Next, there's a key difference that I want to talk about, and that's the importance of understanding the difference between saving in your retirement account and investing those dollars. So let's talk about that next. So what does saving and investing have to do? Are they different? Are they the same thing? Should they be the same thing? Well, retirement accounts aren't just for savings. A lot of people have their retirement accounts in just cash, which misses out on key growth opportunities. Simply having money in a retirement account isn't enough. It has to be invested because growth comes through investing. Investing allows your money to grow, reducing the amount you need to save from your income. Because if you need $2 million, but you make $100,000 a year, it's going to take you a long time, a very long time to get to $2 million. But if you're investing it, you can get that compound interest working behind you. Things like total stock market funds can be a great place to provide significant growth. Also, you need to make sure you have regular check-ins on your 401k and IRA because you need to make sure that money is invested. That's why those statements come in the mail or they're emailed to you. Make sure you look at them and your money's not sitting in some cash line item. And if it is, call up your 401k and figure that out and get it invested. There's also a great opportunity for long-term strategy when you begin to understand the difference between saving and investing because your long-term strategy needs to include investing. An effective retirement plan has some great, wise, early investing, so make sure there's a big difference between saving and investing. I think they should be synonymous and that saving should mean investing because investing is a great place to put your money, but make sure your retirement account at least isn't sitting in cash. Well, that does it for today's episode. Thank you for listening. Let's wrap it up next. So there you have it. We've gone through why you should save for retirement and why you should start early. Remember, the best time for retirement savings and investing is yesterday. The second best time is right now. So go ahead and get started, no matter your age. Remember that direct deposit is the secret superpower of financial automation. It can do a lot, including directing savings directly into an IRA or your workplace 401k. And automation can be a big game changer in your life if you really want it to be. Thanks again to Jenny Logan for coming on today's episode of Money Talk with Skylar Fleming and providing a great conversation on today's episode. I know that I learned some great things from today's Money Talk, and I'm sure you did as well. Now go ahead, imagine yourself 30 years down the road, thinking back on this podcast episode and how grateful you are that you went ahead and started investing for your future with your retirement. And lastly, don't forget that free money that you can go grab with your employer's company match. Just imagine it's free food at a company party, and who doesn't want to take as much of that as they can? Be sure to take it and let your retirement savings grow. Speaking of growth, this podcast is continuing to grow and grow. Let's hope we can get some compounding working behind it by getting you to share with a friend, getting your friends to share with friends, and let's continue to grow. I'm looking to have more guests on as I prepare to take a few weeks off for my wife and I to go to Hawaii in August. So if you know anyone who has a money story they want to share, send me an email and let me know. I'd be happy to have anyone on as a guest, which includes you. So let me know if you want to come on, and I'm happy to share any story so that we can all learn how to do better with money together. And sharing with a friend is the number one way to help this podcast grow. So if you enjoyed it, please help us grow because I would appreciate that greatly. Or you can also suggest me to go on another podcast as a guest. If you want to hear me talk to your favorite other podcast, I'd be happy to go on other shows if you'd like to suggest me as a guest. So think about this. You have your second favorite podcast because we all know this is your first favorite show, right? But you got your second favorite podcast and you're like, wow, I want to hear Skylar talk about this with this person. Send them an email and suggest me as a guest. I'd appreciate that greatly as well because going on other podcasts is also a great way to help the show grow. Of course, all my contact information and links from today's episode and Jenny's contact information is in the show notes. Thank you all for listening to Money Talk with Skylar Fleming. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Money Talk with Skylar Fleming. This show is provided for informational and entertainment purposes and may not be specific to your unique situation. Please be sure to do additional research before making any financial decisions.